Well, good evening, everyone. Appreciate it very much. You waiting? Sorry, we're an hour late. This is Frank Fear, co-host of Mountaineer Locker Room, and Shane's going to be with us very, very soon. I know a lot of you have asked about Joey Foster. I just had an exchange with him a few minutes ago. Unfortunately, he's in the hospital, not doing well with pneumonia. So we offer Joey our best. No question about that. And we hope he gets back here very, very soon. We don't know when, but this has been going on now for about 3 weeks. It's gotten worse. And the good news is he's getting doctor's attention in the hospital. And so we just hope very much he'll be with us very soon. This is the Big 12 program. So tonight we're going to talk about all matters of the Big 12. Lots of things are happening, obviously, a lot of activity in college football generally, and a lot of it, I think, pertains to the Big 12. One of the things I think we'll talk about tonight, certainly, and I'll kick it off, and it's Shane's joining us right now. He'll be with us in a second, is there's a lot of noise out there about the future of the Big 12 relative to which seems to be the Big 2 now, the Big 10 and the SEC. And let me get Shane. Video coming, I hope. Are you there, Shane?
Yeah, 3 minutes from my house, and I'll be popped in shortly.
Shane, we have a tough time. Could you repeat that?
I'll be calling in about 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, he's going to be with us a bit. And I was saying that one of the things that's rolling around a lot is the future of the Big 12 relative to what's happening in the other, really the Big 2, the Big 10, and the SEC. One of the issues I think that we all have to face is that whether the NCAA is going to be able to take charge of what's happening in college football. They have not really been able to do that. And whether the major conferences will eventually break away and organize their own association or collaboration for major college football. And so we'll definitely want to talk about that tonight because it is concerning. I mean, there's absolutely no question about that. In fact, let me share with you something that Joey and Shane and I saw recently and have been talking about, and I wanted to share it with you. And let me put up this visual. This comes from a post, I guess they don't call it a tweet anymore, by a very widely followed actor on X called Genetics56. His handle is Big Ten Information College Football Fan. That's the handle he goes by. And he recently posted something that I found quite concerning. And the title of his post was, "The Big 12 Conference is on a one-way train to irrelevancy." And there are 4 major points in a rather long tweet or post he had. 4 major points. First, he said, no team is competitive for a national title. And I think what he's saying is with Texas and Oklahoma leaving for the SEC, are any of the remaining teams able to compete for a national title? There's no question from my perspective that the Big 12 is the most competitive league, top to bottom. You can't take any weekend off when you're playing football in the Big 12. And also he talks about money. Number 2, the point there, by 2031, Big 12 teams will get $47 million per school, he projects from the media. Big 10 and SEC schools, on the other hand, will get $100 million. So the money gap he projects will be widening rather significantly. Number 3, media wants to cover teams with the largest fan bases and the best chance to compete for a national championship. And he's predicting that at some point the Big 12 will become equivalent to what we have known as a Group of 5 conference. we'd really like to know what you think about that. Those are very strong comments he's making, and those comments were widely criticized with respect to is the only game in town being able to have the most money with the best media contract. You saw that post as well, Shane. We talked about it earlier on X. And basically what he's saying is the Big 12 is likely to become a group of 5 level conferences. And the Big 10 and SEC will rule college football. Now, obviously, he's a partisan, as we are. He's a partisan for the Big 10. But your thoughts about that? Oop, we lost him. Shane will come back. Any thoughts on your part about what's being said? Here's Timothy. I think the Big 10 and SEC should get equal amounts of money so we can equally competitive. I agree with that. The question is, since the money's coming mostly from the media, is that something that the media wants? Now, one of the things that our good friend Mark Parsons posted today, and probably if you're following various sites on Facebook, you may have seen it. He posted something currently about fan bases in the Big 12, and there were 2 Big 12 teams that are in the top 25 fan bases. That's very important because that's a matter of being able to have eyeballs on games, and that's very important for me. And so what he found and what he posted was that Colorado and West Virginia are the 2 teams that are in the top 25 in terms of fan bases. To a large extent, I think that we're going to bring Shane back in. To a large extent, there we go. To a large extent, we're talking about size of fan bases, and West Virginia and Colorado being the only 2 in the Big 12 that are in the top 25. And I think the legitimate one is West Virginia, because I don't live in Colorado, and I know a lot of people where I live in Florida and Michigan follow Colorado only because of crime. Otherwise, they wouldn't follow it. So that's concerning to me, because those fan base sizes, going back to what Timothy is proposing, gets in the way of an equal division of the money, because obviously they're going after how many people are going to be watching, and the top fan bases, as you might expect, are schools like Ohio State, Michigan, etc. So, Shane, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Oh, I'll tell you what, sorry for the delay. We're getting a storm here in Pennsylvania, and I had to wait for a bus to come back from a basketball game. So I appreciate everybody's patience here on a Thursday night. But yeah, fan bases, I think Prime does inflate the numbers a little bit, but not too much. But West Virginia, we know this because we're fans of West Virginia, and it's not because we're fans. You actually looked at the numbers, and I've lived in multiple states, as have you, and we have a fan base that travels. They're dispersed. They're in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, New York, New Jersey. So you got a lot of eyes on the tube, and also subscriptions because they're displaced. But as far as revenue, I know from the stat I saw 2 weeks ago, West Virginia is one of the top 3, and we're talking revenue per game, and that is butts in stadium seats and what they get from the concessions, etc. And it's really strange to think about, that those are the only 2 schools in the top 25 that have, that kind of draw. You would think Oklahoma State would. I was very surprised because I know, Oklahoma's the big school in Oklahoma, but my goodness, if you had Pennsylvania and West Virginia as one giant state, it would be like Pitt and West Virginia splitting the fan base as far as the way that works. I'm just surprised by those numbers, Frank. I am.
Yeah, it's and also concerning when I looked at those numbers is that, as you might expect, Texas is in the top 25, and so is Oklahoma. And I think
Yeah.
history has a lot to do with that. But be as it may, it just reinforces something that we talked about the other day, Shane, and that is that the good news out of this is that in the reposition, at least for us Mountaineer fans, in the recalibrated Big 12, West Virginia is, if not in the catbird seat, awfully close to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a variety of metrics, then West Virginia is looking very, very good. But the issue here is, how does the Big 12 compare to the other two? One of the things that bothers me is, if you look at the historic purpose of intercollegiate athletics, and you go back to the late 19th century when college football started, Rutgers, Princeton, and then expanded largely to the Ivy League and schools. The major schools have been playing football for 115 years on average. It's this issue of more money, more eyeballs on the media, higher rankings, focusing only on a national championship. Those are recent ways of thinking about what college football and basketball is all about. In fact, we've had national championships in basketball a lot longer, at least a lot longer than football. And so unequivocal national championship in football is a new creation in our lifetimes. That's not the case in college basketball. So I think my critique of that Big Ten source is, you're looking at what college football is in a very skewed manner, about money, about might and national championships. That historically is not the purpose. You ask any fan of any college football program anywhere at what level, and winning a national championship is not job number one. It's having a competitive team. It's being able to support that team, and it's all the social things that go along with college athletics, and being able to share that with college partisans.
Yeah, I mean, this leads into what Chip Kelly said 3 weeks ago, and he was spot on. He basically stated, and I have the article up here, he thinks they need a conference commissioner for football. And, so, your Olympic sports aren't going to suffer. And I'm going to quote him here. He said, just the fact that our school is leaving the Big Ten in football, our softball team should be playing Arizona in softball. Our basketball team should be playing Arizona in basketball. And then he went on to say, because football left, you're saying, well, what do you do with that? Well, Notre Dame's independent in football. Well, I'm quoting him. They're in a conference and everything else. I think we should all be independent in football. So what Chip had said, he went on to also say, we being UCLA should be playing 7 games on the West Coast. And then he was quoted as saying, we should play Boston College, Pitt, West Virginia in the East. Those should be what we should be scheduling. There should be 64 teams and then another 64 teams. And, with that being said, I went on to look, and other folks have suggested, so it's based off of the top 64 teams as far as revenue. The next 64 teams would maybe get it would be set up like basketball does with the NCAA tournament. They get a play-in or get a couple at-large seats, if they win for conference championships. So if that round of 62, you pick 2 or 3 teams out of those that might make it to the playoff. But, those 64 teams in the top tier, would duke it out every year, much like March Madness, but you would have a commissioner in football, NCAA or college football commissioner, and you'd have I would see basketball probably doing the same thing, a basketball commissioner, because that's a big revenue sport. But, this is a football show. We talk about the Big 12. What teams in the Big 12, Frank, would be left out of those 64? And I really don't see any teams being left out. I think they would all be absorbed, into the mega conference. Do you?
Yeah, the only, I agree, and I agree with what you're saying, and I agree with what Chip is saying, and I'll bet you 10-1, and Timothy Green is saying it's right. Basketball is second to none, no question about that at all.
Eight teams in the top 25. Don't even get me started on that.
Absolutely, and the Big 12 commissioner is really promoting that, and I think rightfully so. And I would say that I don't think Chip Kelly is speaking only for himself. I think if you got major college coaches around the table, reasonable people, I think, or athletic directors, I think you probably would end up with the same kind of proposal or a variation of. I always say, the world when it works best is a both and, not an either or. And what's been pressed out of this chase for money has been historic rivalries. The days when West Virginia would play Virginia Tech and we would play, I grew up in Syracuse, New York. West Virginia would play Syracuse every year. And I would look, the Big Four, Penn State, Pitt, West Virginia, and Syracuse. And that to me was Eastern football.
Yeah.
And now, we're going to play Penn State 2 years in a row. That'll go away. Pitt, we hope, will be a longer-term rivalry, but we haven't played either for a number of years, and fans just gravitate to that. And what about Maryland? Yeah, Maryland had to leave the ACC for money and join the Big Ten. They were a inaugural member of the ACC back in '53, and they left. And now, for example, last night I watched Maryland play Northwestern. There's no history between those two schools.
Right.
But the history between Maryland and North Carolina and Virginia has been severed. So now let me do one more thing though that I'll say, and I hope this. Let me put up a chart that I put together, and this is not meant to be negative at all. And it's going to come up now, and it's from an article that, let me get Jackson Johnson, his quote so you can see this. An article that I wrote, released it on Christmas Day, and it's called Inauspicious Start for the Big 12 Football Editions. You can make a lot of arguments why the Big 12, after Oklahoma and Texas left, added Cincinnati, Houston, Central Florida, and BYU. But it's really the first time in history that 4 members of essentially either group of 5 conferences or independent, in the case of BYU, came into a major conference. And I wasn't sure whether that should be framed as a promotion for Cincinnati, Houston, Central Florida, and BYU, or an admission from the Big 12 that it wasn't going to be going after brand name replacements for OU and Texas. And if you look at what those new schools did this year in football, it wasn't very good. They won only 37% of their games and 22% of their league games, and none finished with a winning record. And that was in a Big 12 year that wasn't necessarily as strong, certainly as the year before, when TCU went to the CFP finals. And so this next quote, I think, is extremely important because it does, I think, put pressure on the Big 12 commissioner to not just spin, but to be able to be quite strategic and to be very clear about what is the end goal here. I write, it would be myopic to believe that the issues involved with these 4 additions are just about 4 programs. At stake is the viability of the Big 12 as a power league. We've seen enough to know that major college football is piranha infested, with teams poised to jump conferences engaging in poaching, and media companies competing to get the best lineups possible. In this environment, nothing is certain. The Power Five became the Power Four when the Pac-12 went poof, literally overnight. And there's no assurance that the compression will end there. The ACC is already has a target on its back, and the Big 12 could be next. Now, whether that's going to happen, obviously, who knows? But the point I would make is that it's a complex terrain out there, and I would say yes, Timothy. What do you guys think about this? Because I think, to me, it's the most serious issue facing the Big 12 as a conference.
Yeah, it's the ACC. Let's picture this. You know, wolves will I watch a lot of Discovery. The wolves will basically eat and kill. It's not just the weakest. You know, it'll just keep killing. As long as it can catch it and kill it, it will. And that's what's happening with the ACC. They're going to get they're next. The Bears chasing them, and they're the next slowest. I'm talking the Big 12, aren't too far ahead of the ACC. That Bear's going to be breathing down our neck. The Wolves are going to be nipping at our heels, and they're going to pick us apart unless that group of 64 comes along and these teams make the cut. And I see, Jackson, you're right. WVU, Maryland, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh would really do well in the group of 64. And if you do take right now, what is it? 18 teams in the Big 10. There's 18 teams in the SEC and 16 in the Big 12. I might be wrong on the SEC but let's just say 30, and then another 20 you add. That gives you 50. So you're going to add. There's going to be teams left out. You're going to have your Boston colleges, your Houstons, your UCFs, those are all teams that are right on the fringe of that 60 to 70 range. And those teams are going to really have to have fantastic leadership to help them navigate the frickin' iceberg that's ahead of them. And as we've talked about in the past with Memphis, they did not jump on the life raft because they didn't have leadership at the helm.
That's right.
to help them. It's going to be very crucial for teams because, let's just say there's 18, so 36 between the SEC and the Big 10. Now, my question to you, Frank, is this. Big 10 teams like Northwestern, okay, and then SEC team like Vanderbilt, do those two teams make it in just because they are associated with the Big 10 and SEC, or do you leave them out of the mix? Because, to me, they're not bringing much. They're packing a lunch, but it's just a bread sandwich.
And they're not alone. I mean, if you look at Rutgers, for example, another team in the Big 12. In the Big 10. What clout do they do? When they made that decision, as you know, Shane, the Big 10, it was really territorial. They wanted to get the DC market, and they wanted the New York market as well. And that's why Rutgers and Maryland came in. It was a quid pro quo. Both of those schools were really hurting financially. The Rutgers had left the Big East to come to the Big 10. They were in a free fall financially, and so was Maryland. And God bless him, the Maryland president, when he announced it, said, "We're doing this because not that we're broke, but we're in tough shape." What's interesting about this, and if I could show this, this is a graph that our friend Tony Alcomore just put up today. And what's interesting about this to me was most of the charts I've seen just look at dollars coming in, the money coming in year after year. This is on school profitability. Let me put that up a little bit bigger so you can all see it a little bit better. School profitability of athletic department. And he says, well, athletic departments receive school subsidies. What are subsidies? That means allocations that come from the school budget and student fees. Football at most schools does not pay for itself. It has to be subsidized with money coming from the general fund of the university and student fees. Schools like Michigan, Purdue, Penn State, Texas, they don't need subsidies, but most schools do. Even though the major schools, it's modest. West Virginia, for example, it's about 8% of the athletic budget. I think $5 or $7 million a year comes from the general fund, which is not large. What sometimes we don't know is that the money that comes in to college sports in some places, that money subsidizes the school through transferring money from the athletic department to the general fund. Michigan is notorious for that.
Yep.
It's a source of pride. You can see at the far left, in 1 year, Michigan athletics transferred $100 million to the general fund. Now, West Virginia, the last data I've seen, our athletic budget was $105 million.
Yep.
So this gives you an idea of scale. And Ohio State is doing the same thing. So what's interesting about these numbers, it's not just money coming in. It's money that's left over after all the bills are paid. Now,
yep.
If you look all the way to the Big 12, what's interesting about those last three in the red, those are all new additions. Arizona is in terrible financial shape, and so they're in the red. University of Central Florida is in the red. Houston is in the red, and Cincinnati is barely in the black. And if you look at West Virginia compared to the rest of the Big 12, this is another indication of the stability and the positioning of West Virginia in the Big 12. We're third. Now, there are several schools here that are not included because in many cases, the private institutions are not required. They're not required to report a lot of these data. So we shouldn't see Baylor or TCU on that list there. I'll show you a chart that Tony released today, Shane, where interestingly, TCU and Baylor are presented, and I think it's going to be surprising. But the same
I'm thinking they're pretty profitable. I'm thinking they run that like a business. I'm going to guess.
Okay.
They're around West Virginia, Iowa State, Texas Tech ballpark.
Yeah. And so you don't see Vanderbilt in the SEC list, and you don't see Northwestern in the Big Ten list because those are private schools. But you see West Virginia is what is 23.4 million profitability for West Virginia, and that compares in the middle of the ACC. But if you look at the SEC, it would be toward the bottom. And if you look at the Big Ten, it would also be toward the bottom. Again,
now, Frank, one real quick, a thought here. You have to think about this. The Big Ten schools are making about 30% more per year. Even the lower tier schools that are just like Illinois. So we're talking that would add to West Virginia's kitty and make them look a little better after a couple years of being in there. So
that's right. No question about that at all. And I'm going to answer your question if I can take this off just for a second here. We're going to take this off, and I'll put up another one that does include the private data, and that's here. And this is put this up.
Wow.
So we can see it. Don't pay attention to the bottom row. Those are, for the most part, group of five, and the Big East is basically basketball. And don't pay attention to the Ivy. But look at the Big 12. Now, this is how much out of the school budget, again, Tony Altimore, God bless him, he puts these charts out like we write.
Whoa, TCU is killing it.
Can you imagine that? At TCU, one of every $4 in their general budget is going towards sports, and Baylor isn't far behind.
Yeah. Oh, I'm surprised. I knew that they really valued sports, but that is phenomenal. And compared to a private institution like Northwestern and Vanderbilt, where it's an afterthought, that's fantastic. We're blessed to have them in the Big 12.
Well, and it's also football crazy Texas. What's interesting about that, if you look at Houston is far. I mean, what is it? 5.8%, 5.9% of their total budget is going to sports, compared to TCU and Baylor. And where's Texas Tech? Texas Tech is 8.7. And again, West Virginia on this one, I think any reasonable person would say, this may not be one where you want to be at the far end. You want to be somewhere in the middle. But what surprised me there was Utah, very competitive athletics.
Yeah.
That's showing you that Utah is getting a lot of donor money. It's getting media money. There's a lot of attention on Utah. They're good in football and basketball. The big focus of sports. What's also interesting, we were talking about last time, Shane, is Arizona State. That's probably an indication that athletics may not be as important at Arizona State as it is at a TCU. And BYU is right in the middle. I thought that would be higher too, but I thought that was interesting to show you.
Frank, these numbers are going to shift because you have to remember this. Some of these schools have not had the expenditures of like UCF. I'm sure the data is for a year old. I'm sure they haven't put into what the travel costs are for all of these sports programs to travel across the United States. Yeah, they're in Florida. You may as well be another West Virginia for UCF because they have to travel to Iowa State. They have to travel to even flying over to Texas is going to cost them a huge chunk of cash.
That's right. Absolutely. So, let's have some more comments from the viewing audience, how you feel about all of this.
Oh,
it
makes your head spin. I'll tell you, it's getting to the point because, it would be a better product if, and I don't want to put bumpers on it, but if there were some sort of, not regulation, but oversight by a commissioner, to make sure that it doesn't have to be equal, but it should be fair, if that makes sense. Oh, yeah, MH5, what's he say? He said, if we start paying players, the NCAA is dead. That's true. Particularly in college basketball and March Madness. If it gets monetized like college football, the billion-dollar tournament will become a money grab. Well, it is. It is a money grab, and it has been for years. However, the fact that we weren't paying players was kind of keeping that, everybody in bubble wrap. We've taken the bubble wrap off, and people are bouncing into the walls. It's ugly. Kids are, I'm reading here that there's kids asking for 7th year of eligibility. And why is that? It's because they're getting paid more money than they would if they went and tried out for the draft, tried to make it in the NFL or the NBA. So,
to me, what I'm worried about more than anything else is that the issues we're talking about tonight, talking about, playing regional rivalries, getting serious about what Chip proposed, those things get swept aside if all you're talking about, and it is a money bag. Absolutely, you stop thinking about those, and how the only thing you think about is how can I optimize my bottom line, which is more money, more money, more money. And what that does, and this is the real issue, it reduces the number of programs that can play that game. And I'm glad that some of the think tanks around the country, and there are think tanks in college sports, are basically saying that may be the gain here, that the Big Ten and the SEC want it to be all about money because they're in a position where they
Right.
have the lion's share and they want to continue to compress so that, they don't want to put an end to college football for the other leagues, but they want to put their arms around what the media offers. That's not in the best interest of money. It's not. It's not. And it's not what the fans want, I think.
And it's monopoly. You know, they're putting their houses on their properties and just waiting for everybody to circle around. And eventually, guess what? Everyone else is going to go broke. There's only going to be so many teams left. And and you see this. I watched that Welcome to Wrexham. Okay. It's about that soccer team that was bought by Ryan Reynolds. And it's very entertaining. But the proof is they put money into the program. They won, last year. They got relegated. They were relegated down to the lower league. Now they're back up. If they put more money in, they're just going to go up. It's money. Money moves the needle. Okay, I don't care. That's why there's salary caps. That's why because at the end of the day, you don't want to be the Pittsburgh Pirates that's just playing to make a little bit of profit. They have one. The Pirates have one of the best stadiums, and I'm not a big baseball guy. Okay, I think it's kind of boring, but they have a fantastic stadium. They have a fantastic product, but the team sucks. Now you have the New York Yankees that can just outspend anyone. It makes the product not as enjoyable. Where you have the NHL, the NBA, NFL. It's year in and year out.
Well, hopefully Shane will come back.
Yeah, like the Eagles. Sorry, like the Eagles. They're out of the playoffs. They were in the Super Bowl. So that's the product I like to see. I don't want to see a team every year there. I like a little bit of parity, but I don't know, Frank. It is what it is, and it's still an enjoyable product. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy talking about it. I hope that we get to the end of the road and it's a better product. I hope in 3 to 5 years it's a better product. I pray that this is just growing pains, but I believe that the volcano hasn't exploded yet. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this, that it shows you can go one way, one road, walk one road, and not necessarily get very far. If you look across the various conferences that have added teams, they haven't come in and taken their new league by storm. When you think about going back to when Penn State joined the Big Ten, they didn't, they owned the East. We know that. They had a tough time competing in the Big Ten, and it took them a number of years before they really had a drum roll. Nebraska has had no impact, literally, on the Big Ten football.
Nebraska who?
Exactly. They were great in the Big Eight. And then, the Big 12. And, you look at the other additions to the Big Ten. Maryland has not done anything significant. Rutgers certainly hasn't done anything significant. And
But Frank, they weren't good. They weren't relevant before in the Big East. I'm sorry, they weren't. Like Rutgers Rosciano had maybe 2 years where they competed for the Big East, but they weren't really great.
You're absolutely correct. And, as I said, they were picked for geographic purposes. Big Ten wanted to put a stake. They're doing that now. West Coast to East Coast. That's what it was.
They wanted, and this is the joke, Frank, the Big Ten wanted a perennial homecoming game. And they schedule Rutgers as the homecoming game.
Right. That's right. And when you really look at the Big Ten expansion now, think about it. USC isn't the USC that it once was. UCLA is real. If they put 30,000 in the stands at the Rose Bowl for home games, they're doing well.
Yeah.
Oregon is going to be the strongest team coming to the Big Ten. I hate to say it, but what happened to Arizona is happening to Washington.
Right.
Players are going into the portal. Washington is going to, the transfer of the Arizona coach to Washington hasn't done a lot to keep players there. There are significant numbers going into the portal because remember, the portal date at the end of the fall season ended, I think, the January 2nd. But if your coach leaves, that opens up another 30-day period. So now the Arizona players and the Washington players, they're leaving. And so now two teams that were predicted to be at the top of their respective leagues, Washington in the Big Ten, Arizona in the Big 12, may not be competitive in those leagues come 24. And it only took a week. In a week.
You can't blame these kids either, because if the new coach is coming in, and you're sitting there like, hey, we just played for a national championship. Next year I'm supposed to get some time. That new guy's coming, and guess what he's doing? He's using that window, just like everyone else, because he could talk to a couple guys. He's going to bring some of his guys with him, more than likely. We saw that the precedent was set with Dion, and these kids know that, and they don't want to roll the dice and be at the wrong end of the stick, and then they don't want to wait until April 25th. They have another 5-day window opens up. No, they're going to roll the dice, especially if a coach has talked to them on the phone, like, listen, come here, I got this much money, I can you can compete for this position. Because they're wanted. At least they know they're wanted, I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing in Alabama. As soon as Nick Saban...
They're leaving Alabama. What? I didn't think that was going to be possible with the monopoly money, the jet, you had Georgia's coach fly in, talk to a recruit on a helicopter. That's kind of, what? If I'm a parent, I'd be like, nah, that dog's not going to hunt. I'm sorry. Get your ass back on the helicopter. My kid's not coming to your school, because that's just arrogant and that's just nonsense. Call them on the phone. You don't need to make a big show. And, I like the coaches that sneak in and sneak out, call them on the phone. Hey, I came to your game, but I don't know. That's just my opinion, but
I think you're absolutely correct. And I look at it this way, and I was stimulated by Timothy Green's comment that I put up. I'll put it again, that the amount of money that it takes to run a school's sports programs. I don't care what big city you may live nearby.
Right.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's Pittsburgh. I don't care what it is. It could be Charleston. And you then think about the most exclusive neighborhood in those cities. Only a small portion of the population are able to have enough money to buy homes to live in those exclusive neighborhoods. And I think that's where we're headed, and we're already there in major college sports. Here's another good comment. Yeah. These brands were built regionally, MH5.
Great comment.
Lose value in a new conference when they go 7-5 instead of 10-2 most years.
Look at the map, and when you travel and you stop somewhere and you go to buy stuff at Walmart, you look at what colleges are in that store, okay? And if you go in Western Pennsylvania up into Washington County, PA, you're getting West Virginia stuff. You are. You go down to almost southern part of West Virginia, 2/3 of the way through West Virginia until you get away from the West Virginia stuff and see some Marshall stuff, and that's true for Penn State.
Oh, yeah.
You go the whole way I live northwest of Pittsburgh, up by Slippery Rock. Okay. We are closer, to Ohio than you think. And guess what you have at Walmart and at Sheetz? Penn State. You go the whole way to, almost to Warwick, New Jersey, and you're still seeing Penn State.
Right.
You go down to Bedford, down by the Maryland border, you're seeing what? Penn State. You see it here and there around Pittsburgh, but you also see what? Penn State. Now, with Michigan, I lived in Michigan. It was, you go to Jackson, Ann Arbor, it's all Michigan, but there's still Michigan State stuff sprinkled in, and all through Michigan. It's Michigan, Michigan State. It's kind of like salt and pepper. Nebraska, okay? You find Nebraska stuff you used to in the 90s and the 2000s. You saw it. Nebraska's a huge state. You would see Nebraska stuff in South Dakota. You see Nebraska stuff a little bit in Iowa. It was crazy. It's crazy. Same with Florida State. Florida State and Florida, you go to any store in Florida, you're going to see Florida State. It's that way. Georgia, you have Auburn, Georgia, Clemson, South Carolina. It's regional. And the fact that West Virginia does not have a pro team, Utah does not have a pro team. It's BYU. It's Utah. And the thing of it is, and I'm getting to a point, bear with me. UCLA, Pitt, Rutgers, they don't have the footprint. They just don't. You travel, you don't see that. People in New York could give two craps about Rutgers because they're rooting for the Jets, they're rooting for the Giants, and they don't care. The same is true with Baltimore. They're Ravens fans. There might be a few Maryland fans there. Maryland has a good representation, but UCLA, you saw on that sheet, they're not bringing in the money. The fans don't care. They have a few, people that like to rock that pretty blue and pretty yellow. They might sell some jerseys, but they're not a brand like they used to be when they were winning national championships in basketball. USC is another one that gets some love, but not nearly what it did 10, 15, 20 years ago. But I'm off my high horse.
No. You forgot Buffalo. I'm trying to. What's
Buffalo? Yeah, you go up to Buffalo, and they have a freaking. They actually have a pro team. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too that I grew up in Western New York. College football is not king in Western New York. The nearest major school is Syracuse in Central New York, and so football Saturdays in Western New York mean far less than football Sundays. It's NFL focused. And hockey is big in Western New York too.
Yeah. You start getting hockey, yeah.
Exactly. And so I like this point, the point that MH5 brought up, that it is regional. And if you try to go national, for example, when the Big Ten starts having games, UCLA at Rutgers or Indiana at USC, that's stretching it. I mean, those are the tickets to those games are the games you give to friends. It's not the same as Washington at Michigan. It's not the same as Ohio State at Oregon. But the problem is you've got a lot of lower tier teams in because the Big Ten, come on, is not a top to bottom competitive league. We know that. I mean, the Big Ten West for years was a joke because there were so few competitive teams. Illinois, Wisconsin owned it, Iowa once in a while, and then you say, who else? Northwestern once in a while.
It's like watching a heavyweight fight. Okay, it's either really good or really bad. It's two fat guys sweating on each other or two guys slugging it out. You have Michigan. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
You have Ohio State slugging it out. They're fit. They're your heavyweights. Everyone else are just butterbean and some has been duking it out. As far as I'm concerned, it's not a fun product. Now, I'll tell you this: you go and you watch the Big 12. You watched the Pac-12 last year. Those are middleweights. Those are guys that are just it's just more entertaining as far as I'm concerned.
I agree, and I think when I always say this in a variety of fields, when we start talking about the issues we're talking about tonight, which money, competitive positioning, hey, wait a minute now. It's about the game you're in. And what you described is about the game, and I don't mean that in a political sense. I'm talking about the game on the field. The Big 12, I think, has the best competitive league because
Right.
you don't know from week to week when there are matchups who's going to win, and there are huge surprises. There are always huge surprises because there's a leveling. Not so in the SEC. You've got Vanderbilt. Auburn was awful again this year. Mississippi State was not that competitive. South Carolina, my heart bleeds for the Gamecock fans. They want to win so much, and they almost never do. A lot of people don't realize this, but one of the first conference movers from one conference to another was South Carolina. They were a charter member of the Atlantic Coast Conference and then got into a pissing match with the commissioner about scholarships and academic standards, and they bolted to the SEC. Would they be competitive in athletics if they were still in the ACC? I don't know, but they're not in the SEC. And the same thing with the Big Ten, not in the Big 12. And I think these new additions, maybe with the exception of Arizona State, as we talked about the other day, will be also competitive. Utah, nobody wants to go to Utah and play the Utes. Nobody wants to go to Colorado with Prime and play Colorado. The bottom line is it'll be more competitive. But, the bottom line here for me is let's not allow these other things, which they're increasingly doing, interfere with what's best for the sport and what enhances the game that we love that's being played on the field. Here's a question that's coming up. Tim has a question. That's a good question.
I'll answer that. I've thought about that. Okay. West Virginia would be 6-5, pretty much, maybe 7 wins. I'm talking average out. They would be better than a Northwestern. They would be better than, a Rutgers. Okay. But they would be just below Penn State as far as being competitive. They'd have a year there where they might do really well. I think it would be just as difficult for them to win the Big 10 as it would for them to win the Big 12. Okay, it's not an easy, because this is my rationale. And Frank, I think you're picking up what I'm putting down, because instead of in the Big 12, you have 6 teams that can beat you. Okay, but it's more of a 50-50 shot. Okay, in the Big 10, okay, the Big 12, you have a 50-50 shot of beating those 5 teams. The Big 12, you got 3 teams you got to beat. Everyone else, you have an 80% chance of winning. But those 3 teams, you don't have a very good chance of winning. But if you win one or 2 of those, you're talking playoff. You're talking being in the conversation for a playoff. Which would you rather have? As a fan, I would rather take the 6 wins and the crapload, double the income for my program, and hoping that you get a quality coach to bring your brand up there to be competitive, because it's, what have you done for me lately? If you have, because the thing it is, at West Virginia, what's West Virginia's biggest fear? We lose our coach to a bigger program, much like Arizona. If you're in the Big 10, well, it didn't really help Washington. They're in the Big 10 now, but hear me out. If you're in the Big 10, there's only maybe 2 or 3 teams that it would be a big move for someone. If it's a Michigan or an Alabama or a Georgia, those are royalty. Everybody wants to dance with those beautiful broads at the ball. But with West Virginia being in the Big 10 or SEC, you'll have that little bit more stability, even if you're, winning like say Arkansas does in the SEC, and we would be as relevant as like an Arkansas in the SEC. Arkansas in the SEC in the 60s, they were fantastic. Okay, sports is cyclic. You saw that in the NFL, the Patriots, they were just dominant for years. Now they're not doing so well. It's like that. It's not really as much like that now in college football because you have the haves and the have-nots.
Sure.
And the have-nots right now is Arizona. They have penthouse dreams, and what do they have? An outhouse budget. They're really just having a hard time now. Every kid's leaving the program. The coach has left, and they went from being in the conversation of playing in the playoffs to, okay, can they compete in the Big 12 and be a top 5 team, you know? And the way it stands, they were at the top of my pick for the Big 12. Now they'd be down towards lower rung just because they lost so much and there's so many big question marks.
Yeah. And another way to answer this question, how would West Virginia do in the Big Ten, is that take the Big Ten aside and look at it this way. We had John Antonic on yesterday on our Mountaineer Locker Room show, and I just posted his interview as a separate video that you can see on the West Virginia channel. And he went back and analyzed, for those of you that didn't see that, he analyzed West Virginia's strength of schedule since 1950. And what he found, and he's a sports historian like Tony Altamore that analyzes the numbers. And what he found is what coaches are frightened about. He said, generally, West Virginia does better, in other words, has a better record when their strength of schedule is quote unquote manageable. And that means collectively their opponents are around 500. Okay, around 500. In fact, we went back to 1988 and said that year when West Virginia went to the national championship game, there was really only one team, Syracuse, that West Virginia beat that was a strong team. And that was Syracuse, and they were 10-2 that year. And if you go back, you can do this by going on Wikipedia. Look at the schedule that West Virginia faced, and a lot of those teams were a bit above or significantly below 500. So, if you look at the Big Ten, you've got a lot. If West Virginia's in the Big Ten, so if you take what I just said and apply it, there are a lot of teams in West Virginia is just as competitive with now in the Big Ten. Yeah,
they played those teams for years in the Big Ten, the Marylands, the Rutgers. Those were, I think the series against Maryland is like West Virginia's leading by, I think, 3 or 4. I have to look, but, going back, it's pretty even split, much like Virginia Tech. But, Rutgers, West Virginia has owned Rutgers, okay? It's just bottom line. So a lot of those teams, it's like 6 degrees of separation with Kevin Bacon. They all kind of tie in. They've all played each other, so.
Exactly the same thing with the ACC. Because
they're like caught between the two conferences. They've played a lot of Virginia Tech. They played a lot they played Pitt a lot. They played Penn State a lot. They played Ohio State a handful of times over the years. But going back historically, they used to play William and Mary. They used to play Army when Army was good. I mean, so. When you have teams like UCF that don't have that long history, but they have a huge student base, they're going to have a big alumni association in the future. They're going to have that revenue stream. So you have to look at that. You have these smaller schools like Wake Forest that graduate not very many people a year, don't have a huge alumni base. Do they make the cut in the when you go to 64 teams? But I don't know. It's been I'll tell you what. I was hustling to get on the show, and I can't shut up now. So, I just want to touch on the transfer portal coming up in a few months. I think coaches right now are going to take a breath, maybe take a couple days off. They're going to regroup and kind of, reassess. I think they're still learning how to suck this egg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They know it needs sucked. They know it's going to be messy, but how do we do it? No one has answered that yet. There's so many different approaches. I haven't watched there hasn't been a new episode of of Primetime's show on Amazon, so I haven't been able to indulge in that just to see how the haves and the have-nots live. But I think he's still one of those teams next year that has a chance of winning every game they play, and that's the case for much of our beloved Big 12. Right?
Yeah, I think the answer, believe it or not, MH5, I'd have to look at the numbers, but my recollection is, drum roll please, the largest alumni living base is the University of Central Florida.
Wow, I believe it. I thought so, because the fact that have so many kids in the school.
Second largest university in the country behind Texas A&M. Last time I looked, 72,000. I'd have to look it up. In fact, I will look that up. And the next time we do a show together, I'll have it. But I'm pretty sure it's, and I bet you Tony Altimore knows, but I'm pretty sure
MH5. That's a great point. We love that. Love to see that stuff in the comments. And guys, I want to remind you, you don't have to do super chats to get us to, answer your questions. Frank, he exercises that mind daily, looking up stuff. I mean, he doesn't sweat. He sweats numbers and figures. Okay. When he takes a shower, there's decimal points and minuses and pivot tables coming out. So, hey, with that being said, I want to thank you for coming and being the pivot man for Joey and me. Hopefully Joey feels better. Best wishes and Big 12 kisses to Joey. Hoping he gets better, mends well.
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit in a tweet as you were in a text when you were driving, and I told the audience he's in the hospital. He has pneumonia, very bad case of pneumonia, to the point that he is. I don't know when he's going to be back, and there's a show tomorrow.
Right.
It was the West Virginia Live program. I'll probably do that again. We've got to figure out how we're going to do that. But
I'll jump on there with you tomorrow night.
Great. Well, always a pleasure working with you, and I'll tell you, you're the man, Shane, and so is Timothy and all of you. I mean, we do this together.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, Frank is the man.
We do it for you, and we enjoy it, and we learn a lot as we do it. And so I'll turn it to you, Shane, to wind down the program.
Right. Hey, guys, if you like this content, be sure to subscribe and share it, and catch us weekly. Frank, you can catch Frank on Wednesdays on his show. Mondays I'm on with Joey, and we have a show, West Virginia Fan Zone. Wednesday Frank had a fantastic interview. If you are a West Virginia fan, that name and you're familiar with his work. If not, guys, tune in. Between Frank and him, they are like the Encyclopedia Britannica of college sports. So, Jackson Johnson, yes, that's the link right there, at West Virginia, Voice of College Football. So, guys, with that being said, I hope you have a safe and great weekend, and you'll see us both on here tomorrow, filling in for Joey. What time is our show tomorrow? To be determined. So we'll let you know, guys.
Probably 8 o'clock. Now
Right, yeah, probably 8 o'clock.
and I can't commit that I could do the show. We'll have to juggle some things around, but anyway, there will be a show at 8 o'clock.
7 or 8, we'll figure it out sometime, okay?
Okay.
All right, guys. Thanks again. Bye-bye.